people who don't have English and come to an English-speaking country, how would they encounter resistance, or how would they unconsciously court resistance?
Well, again, by not being aware of the environment, not being aware of the people that they're interacting with and their circumstances, and pushing their agendas without enough sensitivity. So to some extent, you know, if they're going into the countryside, some cultures who are used not to be very aware of the countryside or of their environment, some cultures that throw garbage around a lot, may just throw garbage around without even thinking about it, because in their culture,
which I would think would be really important.
Very important. And sometimes we dress without acknowledgement of the culture we're going in. I mean, there's a lot of polemic about that and a lot of concern in some countries about people's dress. But I subscribe to the view that unless you can understand the context behind that behavior, including the way people dress, then it's very dangerous to start making judgments, and certainly to legislate in ways which could create a lot of resistance. And sometimes that resistance can go to even violent resistance. So, you know, I'm talking about things that may affect individuals, but they also affect, you know, countries, nations, and the polarity between nations and the conflict between nations.
So go back to the 4 stages again.
Right. Well, that's the starting point. So we start being unconsciously incompetent, making mistakes without realizing it, then starting to learn a little bit about the fact that we've made mistakes by people's reaction to us, which, as I said before, I don't think is a very productive way about learning what's appropriate. So the first stage in my own journey with people is to get them to be appreciative of their potential for upsetting people. That's the first stage of our journey, and the second stage of our journey is for them to become more competent in a conscious way, which is to learn something about how to behave in a way that is going to get cooperation and harmony with people. And the fourth stage, which doesn't happen overnight, is that by the third, well, it's actually the 4 stages. Is that you start with being unconsciously incompetent. Second stage, consciously incompetent. Third stage, consciously competent. And the fourth stage, unconsciously competent, which is when you start to embed that behavior without even realizing it, so that you instinctively create a way of getting cooperation rather than resistance. And the sort of programs that I run take them through the stage to get to being consciously competent. What I leave them with is ways of practicing this sort of behavior, and to some extent sustaining that sort of behavior through literally practicing behaving this way. And by practicing behaving this way in a conscious way, 2 things start to happen. People start realizing that their relationships are more harmonious and more productive, and because of that, it sustains their behavior. And by sustaining that behavior, within a short space of time, you're not conscious that you're doing it anymore. You've then become what I would consider to be multicultural in your mindset. And that's really, I work in very, very, very different and diverse environments, but the principles are all exactly the same. The principles of what I'm delivering are exactly the same, which starts out by saying to people, just be interested. Put your attention on the people and the environment that you're dealing with. Put less attention on yourself.
Well, give me some examples of different environments that you work in, a spectrum.
Well, the simplest and most straightforward environment is when people are working literally in countries that aren't their own, when they're sent on assignments to different countries. The next level is when people are working in multicultural teams, as they are increasingly around the world. So they're working with people that are coming from different environments, but they have to work as a cohesive team.
And in those kinds of teams, there could be several.
Many, yes,
Yeah.
many people from different backgrounds in the same team, and I do that all the time. And that is a way in which team members have to start to be more sensitive towards each other. And using these tools, they're demonstrating more interest in their team members than they are in themselves. So in the process of learning more from their colleagues and their colleagues' backgrounds, they're also building these sort of more cooperative relationships. Sorry.
So I was just wondering about team dynamics, which must come into play.
Absolutely.
And how does that become, is that sort of another a more complex branch of?
Yes, the more cultural backgrounds that you're dealing with, the more complex it is. But the principles are still the same. The point about it is that in most teams, and some cultures are more team-oriented than others, and more, if you like, collective than others, collective cultures. A lot of Eastern cultures are very collective cultures, and they work collectively. But still, the vast majority of people ultimately are more interested in their agenda than they are in their teammates' agenda. And for that reason, they are, again, interacting selectively with their team members, which could potentially develop into a resistant relationship and a less teamwork.
What does that mean?
Well, it's like what we're doing is, if we're trying to get cooperation from our team member and we're trying to get our team member to do something, we're more likely to get them to do it and do it more productively if we put a lot of attention on being interested in them and their environment, what their issues are, to be able to achieve that goal. Invariably, what happens is we're more interested in getting what we need to get done from that person than how that person can get it done from his perspective or her perspective. It's really a question of really understanding their perspective to get it done more cooperatively, rather than understanding my agenda. It's putting my attention away from my agenda to their agenda and their perspective. And that, I believe, encourages more harmonious, productive relationships and less stressful ones for ourselves. We develop a lot of stress ourselves by interacting with people in a very monocultural way, a very subjective and a lot of the time judgmental way. And the judgments that we make are all based initially on our perspectives and our backgrounds as the point of reference, because we don't have enough information about another point of reference.